The slap cracked through the cafe so loudly that every conversation died in an instant. 1 second, the morning crowd inside El Camino Coffee was busy with laptops, breakfast meetings, and the usual rush of downtown San Antonio. The next, complete silence settled over the room. Miguel Alvarez didn't move. The side of his face burned where Victoria Stanton's hand had landed, but he remained perfectly still, one arm wrapped protectively around his 8-year-old daughter. The little girl clung to his shirt. "Dad," she whispered. Miguel lowered his eyes toward her. "It's okay, mija." His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that didn't belong in moments like this. Victoria Stanton hated that calm immediately. She was accustomed to different reactions: fear, apologies, anger, excuses. People usually did something when she humiliated them. This man simply stood there looking at her as if she had become irrelevant. The billionaire CEO straightened her designer jacket. "You should be grateful I only slapped you," she said. Nobody in the cafe spoke. Miguel slowly turned his head back toward her. The scar running from behind his left ear down toward his collar became visible beneath the morning sunlight pouring through the front windows. The scar was old, long, jagged, the kind of scar that came from something far more serious than an accident. Victoria noticed it, then dismissed it. To her, it was just another mark on another poor man. She looked at his worn jeans, his work boots, the faded denim jacket, the cheap baseball cap sitting on the table. Everything about him confirmed what she believed she was seeing. Nobody important, nobody powerful, nobody she needed to care about. She had spent 20 years building one of the largest technology companies in Texas. People moved when she spoke. Governors returned her calls. Executives waited weeks for meetings. Entire departments disappeared because she decided they should. Now she stood inside a cafe, arguing with a Mexican single father who delivered construction supplies for a living. The idea itself felt offensive. Miguel looked down at his daughter again. Sophia's eyes were still wet. The tears hurt him more than the slap, much more, because the slap was nothing. Pain was familiar. He had lived with pain for most of his life, but Sophia's fear was different. That mattered. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Yeah?" "Did I do something bad?" The question hit harder than Victoria ever could. Miguel crouched beside her. "No, mija." "But she said you didn't do anything wrong." Sophia nodded slowly. The entire cafe listened. People had watched the accident happen. They knew exactly what had occurred. Sophia had been carrying a cup of hot chocolate. Victoria had been walking while screaming into her phone. Neither of them had been paying attention. They collided. The drink spilled. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it became something else. Victoria looked down at her ruined shoes, a limited edition Italian designer pair worth more than most people in the room spent on rent. To her, that mattered. To Miguel, it didn't. And that difference had created a disaster. The cafe manager stood frozen behind the counter. Nobody wanted to intervene. Not because Victoria was right, because everyone knew who she was, and because power makes ordinary people nervous. Victoria crossed her arms. "Are we finished here?" Miguel rose slowly. His full height surprised several people. He was taller than most men in the room. Broad shoulders, weathered face, the physical presence of someone who had spent his life doing difficult things. Yet there was nothing aggressive about him, only control. Complete control. "You yelled at my daughter." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Because she ruined my shoes." She apologized. "That doesn't change what happened." Miguel nodded once. Then he said something that made several customers glance toward him. "I'll pay for the cleaning." Victoria smirked. "With what?" Miguel ignored the remark. "But you're going to apologize to her." The room became even quieter. Victoria laughed. Actually, laughed. "You think I'm apologizing to a child?" "Yes." The answer arrived immediately. Simple. certain. Victoria's smile disappeared. Nobody talked to her that way. Nobody. Especially not someone like him. For a moment she considered walking away. Then pride stepped in. Pride always stepped in. And pride had ruined more lives than anger ever could. You have no idea who you're talking to. Miguel's expression never changed. I know exactly who I'm talking to. That answer irritated her even more. Across the cafe, a large man in a black suit began walking toward them. Most customers assumed he was just another bodyguard. Victoria certainly did. After all, Bradley Torres had worked for her for nearly 5 years. Former military, professional, reliable. The kind of man who solved problems quietly. Victoria pointed toward Miguel. Remove him. Bradley continued walking. Then his eyes landed on the scar. Everything changed. His steps slowed. The color drained from his face. He stopped, 3 feet away, staring. Not at Miguel, at the scar. The entire cafe noticed. Miguel noticed too. For the first time that morning, something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Not complete recognition, but enough. Bradley's mouth opened slightly. His breathing changed. No, he whispered. Victoria frowned. What are you doing? Bradley didn't answer. He kept staring. The scar, the eyes, the posture. Then another detail became visible. A small silver medallion hanging beneath Miguel's shirt. A symbol Bradley had not seen in 14 years. His stomach dropped. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Because the man standing in front of him was supposed to be gone. And yet he wasn't. He was standing here, inside a coffee shop, holding a little girl. Looking exactly like the ghost Bradley had spent years trying to forget. Bradley Torres forgot about Victoria, forgot about the cafe, forgot about the dozens of people watching. For a moment, he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere hot, somewhere loud, somewhere filled with smoke and screaming. Northern Mexico, 14 years earlier. The operation had never officially existed. No reports, no medals, no public records. Only a handful of men knew it had happened, and half of them were dead. Bradley had been 29, young enough to believe he was indestructible, old enough to discover he wasn't. Their convoy had been ambushed outside a remote mountain town controlled by a cartel so violent that local police refused to enter after sunset. 3 vehicles, 9 operators, 1 extraction mission. Simple. Until it wasn't. The first explosion destroyed the lead truck. The second flipped Bradley's vehicle onto its side. Then, the gunfire started. Hundreds of rounds, every direction. Chaos. Pure chaos. Bradley remembered the fear, the helplessness, the certainty that nobody was leaving alive. Then, he remembered Miguel. Not the father standing in front of him now, the man from back then. The operator everyone called El Fantasma, the ghost. Nobody knew much about him, only that whenever things became impossible, he somehow found a way through. Bradley remembered seeing him emerge through smoke carrying a wounded teammate over one shoulder, then going back, again and again, until everyone was out, including Bradley, especially Bradley. Because Bradley had been trapped beneath twisted metal, his leg shattered, bleeding heavily, certain he was finished. Miguel had cut him free, dragged him through gunfire, taken a blade across the neck during the escape. The wound had nearly killed him. The scar remained, the exact scar Bradley was staring at right now. His throat tightened. Madre de Dios. Victoria snapped her fingers. Bradley. Nothing. Bradley! He finally blinked. What? The word escaped automatically. Victoria stared. She had never heard him answer like that, ever. Remove him. Bradley looked at her, then at Miguel, then back at her. Slowly, he shook his head. No. The room froze. Victoria actually laughed. "What did you just say?" I said no. The silence deepened. One of the customers lowered his coffee cup without realizing it. A woman near the window stopped recording for a second because she thought she had misheard. Victoria stepped forward. "You work for me." Bradley nodded. "Not anymore." "What?" "I quit." The words landed like a second slap. Nobody expected them, least of all Victoria. Bradley removed the earpiece from his right ear, placed it carefully on a nearby table, then looked at Miguel. His eyes were no longer those of an employee. They belonged to a man confronting a ghost. "Miguel?" Miguel studied him for several seconds, then nodded. "Bradley." The big man exhaled sharply. He looked like someone trying to process a miracle. "I thought you were dead. I hear that a lot." A few people laughed nervously. Victoria didn't. "What is happening?" Neither man answered immediately. Bradley rubbed a hand across his face. "You need to leave." Victoria stared. "I'm not leaving." "Yes." "No." "Victoria." Something in his voice finally made her pause. For the first time since entering the cafe, Bradley sounded genuinely serious, not professional, serious, dangerously serious. "You need to apologize." The billionaire blinked. "Excuse me?" "You need to apologize to his daughter." Victoria looked around, waiting for somebody to tell her this was a joke. Nobody did. "You've lost your mind." Bradley sighed. "No." Then he pointed toward Miguel. "You just slapped the only man who ever carried me out of a battlefield." The room erupted into whispers. Victoria frowned. "What battlefield?" Bradley laughed once. There was no humor in it. "The kind you don't hear about on the news." Miguel immediately looked uncomfortable. That alone told Bradley he was right. The man hadn't changed. Never wanted attention, never wanted credit, never wanted recognition. Just wanted people safe. That was always enough. Victoria folded her arms. "I don't care if he was in the military." Bradley's expression hardened. "You should." The answer came instantly. "Why?" "Because if he was the man I remember," Bradley paused, "then half the people who owe him their lives don't even know his name." Miguel shook his head. "Let it go." Bradley looked at him. Still the same, always deflecting, always minimizing, always pretending extraordinary things were ordinary. "No." Miguel sighed. The reaction alone confirmed everything. Victoria felt control slipping away. She hated it, more than anything. Power had always been simple. She gave orders, people obeyed. Now, nobody was obeying. Not the customers, not the manager, not even her bodyguard. Especially not her bodyguard. "You are all being ridiculous." A phone buzzed, then another, then another. Several people had already uploaded videos. The confrontation was spreading. Nobody knew it yet, but millions of views were only hours away. Victoria pointed toward Miguel. "This man threatened me." "No." 20 voices answered simultaneously. The cafe erupted, customers speaking over one another, witnesses describing what happened, the manager finally finding courage, baristas stepping forward, everyone talking at once. Because once people realize power is vulnerable, fear disappears surprisingly fast. Victoria looked around in disbelief. The room had turned against her, completely. Bradley watched it happen, then looked back at Miguel. The little girl was still holding her father's hand, Sophia. She reminded him of another little girl, his own daughter, the daughter he almost never got to meet. Because 14 years earlier, he almost died in a valley full of gunfire, and Miguel had refused to leave him behind. The realization hit harder than ever. Bradley swallowed. "You saved my life." Miguel shrugged. "You would have done the same." Bradley laughed again. "No." His voice cracked slightly. "No, Miguel. For the first time, he used his name openly. I wouldn't have. The cafe became quiet once more, because everyone recognized sincerity when they heard it. Bradley shook his head. I was scared. Miguel looked away. I was too. No. Bradley smiled sadly. You weren't. Miguel finally met his eyes. For a second, neither man spoke. Years of memories passed between them. Then Miguel said something so quietly that only the nearest people heard it. I was terrified. Bradley stared, then smiled, because somehow that answer made him even more legendary. The police arrived 11 minutes later, not because Victoria called them, because 3 customers had. The first patrol car rolled to a stop outside the cafe, then a second. Red and blue lights flashed across the windows. The crowd inside shifted. Phones rose higher. Everyone sensed the story was getting bigger. Officer Daniel Ruiz entered first. Mid-40s, calm, experienced. The kind of officer who could identify the center of a problem within seconds. He looked at the spilled hot chocolate, the broken ceramic, the crying child, the red handprint still visible on Miguel's cheek, then at Victoria Stanton, then at Bradley. The former bodyguard immediately raised both hands. Not me. The officer almost smiled. What happened? 20 people started talking simultaneously. Ruiz sighed. One at a time. Several phones were already being offered toward him. Videos, different angles, different recordings, all showing exactly the same thing. Victoria threatening a child. Victoria insulting a father. Victoria delivering the slap. The officer watched, then watched again. His younger partner looked over his shoulder. Neither appeared impressed. Victoria stepped forward. This is being taken completely out of context. Ruiz glanced at her. What context makes this okay? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time all morning, she genuinely lacked an answer. The officer handed the phone back. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step outside. I know the mayor. Ruiz nodded. Congratulations. You don't understand who I am. I understand exactly who you are. His expression remains neutral. That's why I'm asking politely. Victoria felt the room watching, waiting, judging. The sensation made her furious. A week earlier, most of these people would have been eager to shake her hand. Now they were filming her, recording every second, capturing every crack in the image she had spent years building. Outside, another customer uploaded a longer version of the video. Within minutes, it appeared on multiple social media platforms. The algorithm loved conflict, loved power, loved humiliation, especially when the powerful person was losing. Views exploded, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. Nobody inside the cafe knew it yet, but the story was already spreading across Texas. Meanwhile, Officer Ruiz finished reviewing witness statements. The conclusion was simple, very simple. Victoria Stanton had assaulted someone, on camera, in public, with dozens of witnesses. The officer approached her. Ma'am? What now? You are being detained pending further investigation. Victoria stared, then laughed. The sound was forced, nervous, almost desperate. You can't be serious. Ruiz's expression never changed. A pair of handcuffs appeared. Reality arrived, suddenly, violently. For the first time that morning, Victoria felt genuine fear. Not anger, not embarrassment, fear. Because power had always protected her. Money had always protected her. Status had always protected her. Yet none of those things seemed to matter right now. The cuffs clicked shut. The sound echoed through the cafe. Nobody spoke. Nobody cheered. They simply watched. Victoria looked around desperately, searching for support. Finding none. Not from customers, not from employees, not from Bradley. Especially not from Bradley. The former bodyguard stood beside Miguel and Sofia, exactly where he had chosen to stand. Officer Ruiz guided Victoria toward the door. She turned one final time. Her eyes landed on Miguel. He wasn't smiling. wasn't celebrating, wasn't enjoying any of this. That somehow made everything worse, because victory felt less satisfying when your opponent refused to treat it like a battle. The door closed, the police vehicle pulled away, and silence returned. A strange silence, the kind that follows a storm. Sophia looked up at her father. "Daddy?" "Yeah, mija? Can we still go to the zoo?" The question broke the tension instantly. Several customers laughed. Miguel smiled, finally smiled. A real smile, the first one all morning. "Of course." "The whole day?" "The whole day." Sophia wrapped her arms around his waist. The cafe seemed to exhale. People began moving again, talking again, breathing again. Normal life slowly returning. Bradley watched father and daughter for a moment, then spoke quietly. "You really don't remember me?" Miguel looked at him. "I remember." Bradley's eyebrows lifted. "You do?" "You cried the entire helicopter ride." The big man groaned. The cafe erupted with laughter. Even Sophia giggled. Bradley buried his face in one hand. "Oh, God." "You also threw up twice." More laughter. The former bodyguard shook his head. "I saved your life, and this is how you repay me?" Miguel smiled. "You started it." For the first time, Bradley recognized the man from 14 years ago. Not the warrior, not the legend, just Miguel. The same guy who somehow stayed humble no matter what happened around him. His phone suddenly vibrated, then again and again. Bradley frowned. Dozens of notifications, messages arriving faster than he could read them. One came from an old teammate, another from a retired operator, another from someone he hadn't spoken to in 8 years. All asking the same question. "Is that Miguel Alvarez?" Bradley slowly looked up. The video was spreading much faster than anyone expected. Much faster. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. A familiar voice spoke immediately. "Tell me that's not who I think it is." Bradley's eyes widened. Jesus. It was Colonel David Mercer, retired, decorated, one of the most respected officers Bradley had ever known. The colonel continued. "Is that Alvarez?" Bradley looked at Miguel, still talking to Sophia, still acting as if nothing unusual had happened, still looking like a regular father enjoying a Saturday morning. "Yeah." A long silence followed. Then the colonel laughed, a genuine laugh filled with disbelief. "Well, what? Someone just made the worst mistake of their life." Bradley glanced toward the police car disappearing down the street. For the first time all morning, he suspected the cafe incident was only the beginning. Because the internet had just rediscovered Miguel Alvarez, and the internet had no idea who it had found. By sunset, the video had crossed 3 million views. By midnight, it was everywhere. News channels, podcasts, veteran forums, social media accounts dedicated to public confrontations. Everywhere. Most people focused on the slap. Others focused on Victoria Stanton being handcuffed. But among military circles, something else had captured attention. Miguel Alvarez. The name spread quietly at first, then rapidly. Former operators sent the video to former operators. Messages crossed state lines, then countries. One retired Marine shared it with another. A Green Beret recognized the scar. An Air Force pilot recognized the name. A retired intelligence officer recognized neither, but recognized the reactions. That alone was enough. Because men who had spent careers in dangerous places rarely reacted the way Bradley Torres reacted, especially not publicly, especially not on camera. Something was different. Something important. Inside a small house on the outskirts of San Antonio, Miguel remained completely unaware. His phone sat face down on the kitchen counter, muted, ignored, exactly where he preferred it. Sophia sat at the dining table coloring pictures of animals from the zoo. A half-finished tiger occupied most of her attention. Miguel cooked dinner. Chicken, rice, beans. Simple, comfortable, normal. The television remained off. The internet might have been on fire. His kitchen wasn't, and that was all he cared about. "Daddy?" "Yeah, mija?" "Why did that lady hate me?" The question stopped him, not physically, emotionally. He placed the spoon down, turned around, thought carefully. Children deserved honest answers, but they also deserved answers they could carry. Sometimes adults forgot that. Miguel sat beside her. "She didn't hate you." Sophia frowned. "Then why was she mean?" Miguel looked toward the window. The Texas sunset painted everything orange. For a moment, he thought about the countless terrible people he'd encountered throughout his life. Cartel leaders, smugglers, kidnappers, murderers. People who genuinely enjoyed hurting others. Victoria Stanton wasn't one of them. Arrogant? Absolutely. Cruel? Sometimes. But not evil. Not truly. Finally, he answered. "Sometimes people get so used to being important that they forget everyone else is important too." Sophia considered this, the way only children can, without politics, without ego, without complications. Then she nodded. "That's sad." Miguel smiled softly. "Yeah. It must be lonely." That answer surprised him, because it was exactly right. Very lonely. Meanwhile, 200 miles away in Dallas, Victoria Stanton sat alone inside her penthouse apartment. The city glowed beneath her windows. Normally, she loved the view. Tonight, she barely noticed it. Her lawyer had left 3 hours ago. The board had called twice. Investors had called 14 times. She ignored every one of them. Instead, she sat in silence, replaying the video. Again, and again, and again. The first few times she focused on herself, looking for excuses, looking for context, looking for explanations. Eventually, those disappeared. Then she started noticing Sophia, the little girl's face, the fear, the confusion, the tears. Victoria paused the video. For the first time, actually paused it. The child couldn't have been older than 8. Victoria stared at the screen. Something uncomfortable settled inside her chest, a feeling she wasn't accustomed to. Regret. Real regret. Not financial regret, not professional regret. Personal regret. She closed her eyes and remembered being 8 years old herself, standing outside her father's office, listening to him tell a group of investors that daughters were liabilities, that girls weren't built for leadership, that she would never be strong enough to run anything. The memory hit unexpectedly, painfully. Victoria opened her eyes and realized something horrifying. For 20 years, she had spent her life becoming stronger than the people who doubted her. Somewhere along the way, she had become exactly like them. The realization stayed with her all night. The next morning, national news picked up the story. Headlines appeared everywhere. CEO arrested after Café incident. Billionaire loses control during public meltdown. Single father stays calm during viral confrontation. But one headline changed everything. Who is Miguel Alvarez? The article came from a veteran journalist, someone who had spent years investigating military history, someone who recognized unusual reactions when he saw them. The journalist interviewed Bradley Torres, not officially, not on camera, just a conversation. And Bradley said one sentence, a single sentence, nothing more. "If Miguel Alvarez is who I think he is, there are people alive today because he ignored orders and went back for them." That quote exploded online. Millions of readers, thousands of theories. Speculation everywhere. Was Miguel Special Forces, CIA, military intelligence, a rescue operator? Nobody knew. Because nobody could verify anything. Records were scarce, details were missing. The mystery only made people more interested. Reporters began searching. Former soldiers began talking. Stories emerged. A pilot rescued near the border. A DEA task force extraction. A hostage recovery nobody could fully explain. Different names, different years, different locations. Yet one detail kept appearing. Miguel Alvarez, always helping, always disappearing afterward. Never taking credit, never giving interviews, never staying around long enough to become famous. By Monday afternoon, reporters were parked outside his neighborhood. By Tuesday morning, there were twice as many. Miguel noticed exactly none of it, because he had spent years developing a useful habit: ignoring noise, especially public noise. The only thing he noticed Tuesday morning was Sophia standing in the kitchen doorway, looking nervous. "Daddy? What's wrong?" She held up a phone. One of her classmates had shown her the video. Miguel immediately understood. Children talked. The internet moved fast. Eventually, this moment was always coming. Sophia looked down. "Everyone at school knows." Miguel crouched beside her. "And? What if they think I'm weird?" The question hurt more than any wound he'd ever received, because this wasn't about the cafe anymore. It was about childhood, about belonging, about the things parents desperately wish they could protect forever. Miguel gently lifted her chin. "Sophia." She looked up. "Do you know what matters?" "What?" "Whether you're kind." She blinked. "That's it?" "That's it." "What if people don't like me?" Miguel smiled. "Then be kind anyway." Sophia thought about that, long enough for him to see Sarah in her. Her mother used to make the same face, the same thoughtful expression, the same quiet wisdom. Finally, Sophia nodded. "Okay." Miguel kissed her forehead. And in that moment, while millions of strangers argued online about heroes, billionaires, power, and justice, the only thing Miguel Alvarez cared about was getting his daughter to school on time, exactly the way he always had. The courthouse was already crowded when Miguel arrived. Reporters lined the sidewalk. Camera crews occupied every available corner. Veterans stood quietly near the entrance. Some wore baseball caps displaying old unit insignias. Others wore nothing that identified them at all. Yet they had all come for the same reason: respect. Miguel hated every second of it. Not because he was ungrateful, because attention had always made him uncomfortable. Sophia held his hand tightly. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Are all these people here for us?" Miguel sighed. "I hope not." That answer made her laugh. Good. At least one person was still treating the situation normally. As they approached the courthouse steps, several reporters rushed forward. "Mr. Alvarez, do you have a statement? Were you military? Is it true you worked with federal agencies?" Miguel kept walking. No answers, no comments, no interviews. Exactly the same way he had handled attention his entire life. Inside the building, Victoria Stanton sat beside her attorney. She looked different. The expensive confidence was gone. No designer white suit, no carefully crafted public image. Just a woman facing consequences. Her lawyer continued whispering strategy. Victoria barely listened. Instead, she watched Miguel enter the courtroom with Sophia. The little girl looked nervous. Miguel squeezed her hand. Immediately, she relaxed. Victoria noticed. The detail bothered her. Not because of Miguel, because it reminded her of something she never had: safety. Her father had provided opportunity, money, pressure, expectations, but never safety, never comfort, never the feeling that somebody would choose you over everything else. Looking at Miguel and Sophia hurt in a way she didn't fully understand. The hearing began. The evidence was overwhelming. Video recordings, witness statements, security footage. There was nothing to argue, nothing to dispute. Everyone knew it, including Victoria. The judge reviewed the documents, then looked toward her attorney. "How does your client plead?" The attorney stood, prepared, professional, ready to minimize damages. Before he could speak, Victoria touched his arm. The courtroom fell silent. Her lawyer frowned. "What are you doing?" Victoria stood, slowly, carefully, as though every movement mattered, because it did. "Your Honor." The judge looked up. Victoria swallowed. For the first time in years, she spoke without a script, without public relations experts, without advisors, without lawyers, just herself. "I accept responsibility." The attorney closed his eyes. The entire room froze. Reporters immediately reached for notebooks. Victoria continued. "I assaulted Mr. Alvarez." Silence. "I threatened him." More silence. "I frightened his daughter." The room remained perfectly still. "There is no excuse." The judge watched carefully. Victoria's voice shook slightly, not from fear, from honesty, an unfamiliar feeling. "I spent years believing success made me better than other people." She looked toward Miguel, then Sophia. "And that belief hurt someone who didn't deserve it." The statement ended. No dramatic speech, no emotional performance, just truth. The judge nodded slowly. Court proceedings continued. Hours passed. Arguments were made, documents reviewed, witnesses heard. Eventually, the hearing ended. Community service, mandatory counseling, financial penalties, public accountability. The consequences were significant. Yet Victoria barely noticed them, because something else happened, something unexpected. During a recess, an older man approached Miguel. Most people didn't recognize him. Several veterans did immediately. Retired General Thomas Walker, a decorated officer whose opinions carried weight throughout military circles. The general stopped in front of Miguel. For a second, neither spoke. Then Walker smiled, a genuine smile. "You still disappear whenever possible." Miguel groaned. The general laughed. Several reporters immediately noticed. Cameras turned. Questions exploded. Who was this man? Why did a retired four-star general know Miguel Alvarez? Walker looked around, then shook his head. "Unbelievable." Miguel sighed. "Please don't." The general smiled wider. "Don't what?" "You know exactly what." Unfortunately, Walker ignored him, completely. The retired general faced the reporters and said the sentence that changed everything. "The reason Mr. Alvarez refuses interviews is because he spent most of his life helping people he never expected to thank him." Instant silence. Every camera pointed toward him. Every reporter listened. Walker continued. "I've spent 40 years around extraordinary people." He looked directly at Miguel. "This man belongs on a very short list." Miguel immediately wanted the floor to open and swallow him. The general wasn't finished. Years of admiration finally surfaced. "People keep asking whether he's a hero." Walker shook his head. "No." The reporters looked confused. "No?" The general smiled. "Heroes do one extraordinary thing." He pointed toward Miguel. "That fool kept doing them." Laughter spread through the courtroom. Even Miguel smiled despite himself. Walker continued. "He rescued people whose names he'll never mention. He volunteered for missions nobody wanted. He spent years protecting strangers. And every single time someone tried to thank him." The general looked at Miguel again. He disappeared. The room laughed once more, because Miguel's expression confirmed everything. He hated this, absolutely hated it. Walker softened slightly, then said something nobody expected. "The thing I'm most impressed by isn't what happened 20 years ago." The courtroom became quiet again. The general pointed toward Sophia. "It's that after everything he saw, everything he survived, he still came home and became a good father." This time nobody laughed. The words landed differently, heavier, real. Miguel looked away, because that compliment meant more than any military recognition ever could. Much more. Walker noticed and nodded, exactly as if he understood, because he did. The hearing ended shortly afterward. People began leaving. Reporters rushed outside. The story would dominate another news cycle, maybe several. Miguel couldn't wait for it to end. As he walked toward the courthouse exit, a voice stopped him. "Miguel?" He turned. Victoria Stanton stood several feet away, alone. No lawyers, no assistants, no security. Just Victoria. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she looked toward Sophia. The little girl stood quietly beside her father. Victoria took a breath. "I owe both of you an apology." Miguel remained silent. She continued anyway. "Not because of the court. Not because of the internet. Because I was wrong." Her voice trembled slightly. Sophia looked up at her father. Miguel gave a small nod. The little girl listened. Victoria swallowed, then looked directly at Sophia. "I'm sorry I scared you." The words seemed simple, yet they cost her more than any public statement, because they were real. No cameras, no audience, no performance. Just accountability. Sophia studied her carefully, the way children study adults when deciding whether they're telling the truth. Several seconds passed. Then Sophia spoke. "It's okay." Victoria's eyes widened. Miguel's did too, because forgiveness is often easiest for people who have every reason not to give it, and children understand that better than adults. Victoria blinked rapidly. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she smiled. A small smile. The first honest one Miguel had ever seen from her. And for the first time since that morning in the cafe, something inside her finally began to heal. 6 months later, almost nobody talked about the slap anymore. The internet had moved on. It always did. New scandals, new outrage, new villains, new heroes. The world consumed stories quickly, then forgot them even faster. But for the people involved, life continued, and life rarely ends when a viral video does. On a cool Saturday morning, Miguel Alvarez sat on a wooden bench watching Sophia play soccer. The field buzzed with energy. Parents cheered, children ran across the grass, someone burned hot dogs nearby. It smelled like summer. Normal. Beautifully normal. Exactly the kind of life Miguel had fought for. Not the exciting life, the peaceful one. Sophia sprinted across the field, chasing the ball. Missed completely. Fell onto the grass. Immediately stood up, laughing. Miguel smiled. That was his favorite sound in the world. Her laugh. Nothing else came close. Not medals, not missions, not recognition. Nothing. A shadow appeared beside him. Miguel looked up. Bradley Torres, holding 2 coffees. "You always find me." Bradley handed him a cup. "You always sit in obvious places." Miguel laughed. Fair point. The former bodyguard sat beside him. Life had changed for Bradley, too. After leaving Victoria's company, he had started a security consulting business. Smaller, simpler, happier. Much happier. "You see the news?" Bradley asked. Miguel groaned immediately. "No." "Good. I don't want to." "Even better." Bradley took a sip of coffee, then smiled. "She's opening today." Miguel knew exactly who he meant. Victoria Stanton. 3 months earlier, headlines briefly returned, not because of another scandal, because of something unexpected. She had sold most of her remaining shares, resigned permanently from corporate leadership, and invested the money into community programs for children. Many people called it a publicity stunt. Others called it guilt. Some called it redemption. Miguel didn't know, and honestly didn't care. People change or they don't. Time reveals the difference. Words don't. Across town, Victoria stood inside a newly renovated community center. The building used to be abandoned. Broken windows, graffiti, neglect. Now it contained classrooms, counselors, tutoring programs, after-school activities. A safe place for children who needed one. The grand opening had attracted local media. Victoria hated cameras now. Not because she feared them, because she finally understood how meaningless they were. Applause faded. Headlines faded. Reputation faded. The only thing that remained was what people did when nobody watched. That lesson had cost her everything, and somehow given her something more valuable: perspective. A volunteer approached. "Miss Stanton?" Victoria smiled. "Just Victoria." The volunteer nodded. "A package arrived." Victoria frowned. "A package?" The woman handed over a small box. No return address, no explanation, just her name. Victoria opened it carefully. Inside sat a ceramic soccer mug, hand-painted, clearly homemade. The paint wasn't perfect. The lines weren't straight. One side featured a soccer ball. The other featured a small butterfly. A folded card rested underneath. Victoria opened it. Only 5 words appeared. "Thank you for learning too." Victoria stared, then laughed softly, then cried. Just a little, because she immediately recognized the handwriting. Sophia. Across town, Miguel watched his daughter score the first goal of her life. The celebration that followed looked less like professional sports and more like controlled chaos. Sophia ran in circles. 3 teammates chased her. Nobody knew what they were doing, least of all the coach. Miguel laughed. Bradley laughed. The parents laughed. The entire field seemed happier because one little girl was happy. As the game ended, Sophia sprinted toward the bench. "Daddy!" Miguel stood. She launched herself directly into his arms. "What happened?" "I scored." "I saw." "Did you really?" "The whole field saw." She grinned, then noticed Bradley. "Hi, Uncle Bradley." The large man immediately pretended to be offended. "Uncle Bradley? You are old." Miguel nearly dropped his coffee, laughing. Bradley looked horrified. "I'm not old." Sophia nodded seriously. "Very old." The former bodyguard shook his head. "Unbelievable." The little girl giggled, then looked up at her father. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Can we get ice cream?" Miguel smiled. "Of course." "Extra sprinkles?" "Of course." "All the sprinkles?" Bradley laughed. "She's negotiating." Miguel nodded. "She's getting better at it." The 3 of them walked toward the parking lot. The afternoon sun hung low over the field, warm, golden, peaceful. Sophia held her father's hand, completely unaware that millions of people had once argued about him online, completely unaware that some considered him a hero. To her, he was simply Dad, the man who packed lunches, fixed scraped knees, helped with homework, and showed up every single day. As they reached the car, Sophia suddenly stopped. "What?" She pointed toward the sunset. "It's pretty." Miguel looked. The sky glowed orange and gold above the horizon. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Sophia smiled. "I think Mom would have liked that." Miguel's chest tightened. Not painfully, not anymore. Just enough to remind him she was still part of their story. Always would be. "Yeah, mija." His voice softened. "I think she would have." Sophia squeezed his hand. Then they continued walking. The world never learned every detail about Miguel Alvarez. Many stories remained untold. Many always would. That was fine. The most important part was never the missions, never the scars, never the legends. The most important part was what came afterward. The choice to remain kind after seeing cruelty. The choice to remain gentle after surviving violence. The choice to teach a child love in a world that often teaches fear. True strength is not measured by how much damage a person can cause. It is measured by how much damage they refuse to pass on. Miguel Alvarez could have answered humiliation with anger. He could have answered pain with pain. Instead, he chose something harder: restraint, dignity, grace. And because one little girl was watching, that choice mattered more than any victory ever could. Years from now, nobody would remember the price of Victoria Stanton's shoes. Nobody would remember the exact number of views on the video. Nobody would remember the headlines. But Sophia would remember something else. She would remember the day her father showed her that being strong and being kind are not opposites. They are the same thing. And sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who refuses to become cruel when cruelty would be easy. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, Miguel opened the car door for his daughter. She climbed inside, still talking about soccer, still talking about sprinkles, still talking about everything that mattered. Miguel smiled, then followed her home, exactly where he belonged. Before you go, ask yourself one question. What would you have done in Miguel's place? Would you have stayed calm, or would you have fought back? Share your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoy powerful stories about courage, justice, and unexpected heroes, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because sometimes the strongest people are the ones who never need to prove it.